Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dario Health. Manage your blood glucose levels, increase your possibilities. By Gvoke HypoPen, the first premixed auto-injector for very low blood sugar. And by Dexcom, take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
This week, Swiss pump maker Ypsomed is teaming up with Lilly Diabetes to launch an insulin pump here in the U.S. It'll be the first pump that only takes one brand of insulin. I asked Lilly about the thinking behind that decision.
We look at this we don't look at it necessarily as limiting options. We look at bringing a new option to the marketplace that, as an integrated solution, can provide a new way to be able to control the blood sugar. So that's how we look at it.
That's Mike Mason, president of Lilly Diabetes. We talk about what that integrated solution is, more about how the actual pump system will work, and of course, more about its unique proprietary nature. I'll also catch you up on our insulin coupon experience and talk about new A1C guidelines for kids with diabetes. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show where we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with an emphasis on people who use insulin. This year, I'm doing a heavy focus on technology. So this episode is a bit of a follow-up, or maybe a partner, to the one we did in January with Ypsomed. As was announced late 2020, Ypsomed and Lilly Diabetes are teaming up to bring the existing Ypsomed pump, which is used in Europe and Canada and some other countries around the world, to bring it here to the U.S., hopefully to submit to the FDA later this year and be in the marketplace in 2022. The Ypsopump, as you heard in that episode, already has a lot of features that are very popular. It's a very lightweight pump. It has the hybrid closed loop system, similar to Tandem T-Slim, similar to what Omnipod is hoping to launch later this year. So there's a demand for this kind of pump. But the question is, what's going to happen because of the proprietary nature? As you'll hear in this interview, and as we talked about with Ypsomed, this pump will only take Lilly-branded insulin. So to that end, and did you know that I have a weekly newsletter? I do. And this year, I added a poll to it, which is really very popular. I'm so excited to see this. And when we did the episode with Ypsomed, I asked in the newsletter about your opinion on it. Would you use a pump that only took one type of insulin? And I got to say, the results were really interesting and I thought kind of surprising. So 40% of people said yes, if it's a great pump, that is worth it. 48% said maybe. I'd have to feel confident about my insurance coverage. And 12% said no way. I thought the no way would be a bigger number. So we'll keep those polls going. I have a link always in the show notes about signing up for the newsletter. It's very easy to do. I don't spam you. Come on, it's just me. I do send out a newsletter, though, with the week's show, some thoughts about it, that poll, and some other information. As social media shows us all fewer posts, frankly, from the pages that we like and the people that we follow, this is a great way to make sure that you do not miss an episode and that you know what's going on with the show at all times. Okay. Mike Mason from Lilly in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Gvoke HypoPen. And almost everyone who takes insulin has experienced a low blood sugar, and that can be scary. A very low blood sugar is really scary. That's where Gvoke HypoPen comes in. Gvoke is the first auto-injector to treat very low blood sugar. Gvoke HypoPen is premixed and ready to go with no visible needle, and that means it's easy to use. How easy is it? You pull off the red cap and push the yellow end onto bare skin, and then hold it for 5 seconds. That's it. Find out more. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Gvoke logo. Gvoke shouldn't be used in patients with pheochromocytoma or insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk. My guest this week is the Senior Vice President of Eli Lilly and Company and the President of Lilly Diabetes. Mike Mason has been with Lilly since 1989. We last talked to Mike on the show back in 2018. It was our first conversation about the price of insulin. And we, of course, bring that up here in this interview. But we are mostly focusing on the pump and the partnership with Ypsomed and what it's going to take to bring it to the U.S., although I promise I do talk about pricing and accessibility and everything you want to know. Mike, thanks so much for joining me. I'm really interested to learn more. Appreciate you coming on and spending some time with me.
Happy to do it, Stacey. Appreciate what you do for people living with diabetes.
Let's just start by talking about the partnership here with Ypsomed. How did this come about? Tell me about the basics, and I guess we could start with really just, why are you at Lilly excited about this?
No, we're excited about it. I mean, what we do is we step back and we take a look at where the unmet needs are in the marketplace today, and then how science and technology is developing. And what we saw was that, unfortunately, a good percentage of people who live with type 1 and type 2 diabetes who are on insulin are not in good control. And so we saw an unmet need there. And we saw enough advancements in CGMs as well as technology that we felt that putting insulin together with a CGM and good software and analytics that we hope can provide better outcomes with really less burdensome for someone who lives with type 1 or type 2 diabetes. So that's why we were interested in getting into this space. And as we were looking at options, we thought it was best for us to pursue a partner that had a good pump that was on the market today, who was an excellent developer and manufacturer of pumps. And we found the perfect partner in Ypsomed. So we really like their pump. They're an excellent Swiss-based manufacturer. And we think it's a good cultural fit for us. We think Ypsomed and Lilly will work quite well together. And we're both very customer focused and want to make sure that ultimately what's most important is helping people who live with diabetes achieve good control.
Before I ask you about the functionality of the pump, and before I ask you about the features of the pump and more about the partnership, I'm just curious if we could go back. I was at the blogger event that Lilly had in Cambridge in 2018, where you showed us kind of the prototype of a pump that you were working on with a different company. Can I ask what happened to that? Is that not going forward in any way, shape, or form now?
Oh, we very much hope that product goes to the marketplace. The rights to the DECA pump has gone back to DECA. We really value our partnership with them. We think it's a very advanced pump, and we think it could really help people living with diabetes. And we know that DECA is advancing, planning on, advancing that pump to the marketplace. For us, we reflected back on how we can, best use our capabilities to help people living with diabetes or in other therapeutic areas. And as we were facing COVID, we reflected on our ability to develop a new antibody in 9 months and get that to the marketplace and manufacture that. And we felt that as a company, our development and manufacturing focus should really be on developing new medications versus new pumps and new devices like that. So we decided our DECA arrangement, we were responsible for the manufacturing and a good part of the development. And we felt it was better for us to find a partner who already had a pump, who is a manufacturer and developer, and for us to stay primarily focused on building the integrated system and really having that experience with the people living with type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes.
So any DECA pump that goes forward, will that still be used with the proprietary cartridges that we're going to talk about down the road? I mean, is Lilly still involved with the DECA pump, whatever comes to market, or is it basically all in their hands now?
It's in their hands at this point.
Let's talk a little bit more about that Ypsomed partnership. As you listen, we did an episode with them. They went through a lot of the factors and different functionality of the pump. So I'm not going to go through that all again here. But I am curious, Mike, if you could talk a little bit about the algorithms in the pump. In other words, how might it be different from the other pumps that are coming to market? Tandem's Control IQ software is one, the Omnipod Horizon, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think algorithm will be critically important. At the end of the day, what's most important is that you build an integrated system and can help someone achieve better control. And what we think is we can use our 97 years of experience with insulin to build algorithms that do a very good job of controlling insulin and blood sugar. And so that's our plans as we develop new products like Lyumjev, our new ultra rapid insulin. This provides us to potentially provide unique algorithms that can really maximize the potential of a product like Lyumjev.
So let me ask you, the biggest question for my listeners is all about the proprietary nature of the pump. And before we get into that, let me just ask you a few details about it. Will it only use Humalog or will it use other Lilly insulins? You mentioned Lumjev, things like that.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about the pump and why we were excited about the pump. We think it's a very good form factor. It's a small pump. It has a kind of icon-based screen that makes it very easy to use for people who wear it. But one of the most interesting parts of the pump for us was the fact that they have that uses a 1.6 milliliter cartridge. So it's a pre-filled cartridge that then gets plugged into the pump. And what that allows someone to change if their reservoir goes down. So if the cartridge runs out, they can add new insulin independent of their infusion set change. So if you think about the future of infusion sets, we think that will grow from 3 days to longer than 3 days, just like we saw the wear of CGMs increase. Well, that doesn't help if your reservoir, if you have to change your infusion set every time you use your reservoir up. And so we believe that the 1.6 ml cart and the fact that you can do kind of a hot change and change that independent of the infusion pump should be a really nice feature for someone living with type 1 diabetes or even in particular type 2 diabetes who uses larger amounts of insulin on a daily basis, be able to get the full life on an infusion set and be able to add insulin very easily into the pump. So that was one of the primary features that we liked. And so right now that 1.6 ml cartridge isn't on the market. And so in our press release, we communicated that we needed to make sure that we did launch that 1.6 ml cartridge in our insulins, both Humalog and Lumjev, to make sure that people could use our products in that pump.
When it comes to market, it will only, let me ask it this way. Right now in Europe and in Canada, though, it takes a pre-filled cartridge, the same pump of Novo, right? I mean, these 1.6 milliliter cartridges exist elsewhere. This is a US only type of modification. Is it a different kind of pump that's manufactured in the US? How does that happen? Right back to Mike answering that question. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dario Health. Bottom line, you need a plan of action with diabetes. We've been really lucky that Benny's endocrinologist has helped us with that and that he understands the plan has to change as Benny gets older. You want that kind of support. So take your diabetes management to the next level with Dario Health. Their published studies demonstrate high impact results for active users like improved in-range percentage within 3 months, reduction of A1C within 3 months, and a 58% decrease in occurrences of severe hyperglycemic events. Try Dario's Diabetes Success Plan and make a difference in your diabetes management. Go to mydario.com/diabetes-connections for more proven results and for information about the plan. Now back to Mike about how the mechanics of the proprietary nature of the pump will work.
Well, in the U.S. right now, that 1.6 ml cartridge isn't on the marketplace. So we'll have to see, as that advances, it's still kind of early on in development. So we don't really know what insulins will be available in the U.S. for this, in this cartridge size. But what I think is important is, first of all, I don't think anyone should be worried if they're on Novo's insulin or any other insulins. There's going to be plenty of pumps, really good quality pumps for them to use. So I wouldn't have, anyone be concerned about their ability to have a high quality pump to use with their insulin. What we see is we see an opportunity to provide an integrated, very simple to use pump, another option for people living with type 1 and type 2 diabetes to have an integrated, simple experience to improve their blood control.
Yeah, no, I think it looks like a fantastic pump. It's tiny, it's light. I know people in Europe who use it who love it. I love the idea of having more pumps in the United States. But just to be clear, so I guess the question about the proprietary nature that we keep referring to, is it just because there's no pre-filled cartridges of other insulins available in the United States? I mean, you probably cannot answer this. So I'm going to say this out loud and you can say no comment or nothing. But if I have a Ypsomed pump that is approved in here in, let's say 2022, and I bring in Novo Rapid or, Novo Nordisk branded insulin from Canada in the same kind of glass insulin cartridge, and I stick it in the pump, I've made my Ypsomed Lilly pump now compatible with other insulins? Okay, I didn't think you could comment on that.
Well, you're expecting a lot of people bringing product over from Canada. We're still very early on in our partnerships, and so at this point, things are going to have to develop, and we'll better answer that question down the road.
Got it. Okay, I know, and I know you cannot speculate. You have to be so careful in what you say, and I appreciate you coming on and answering these questions. But I mean, I'm sure you can understand in a market that has 3 available insulin pumps in the United States that when one comes in, people have questions about why should I switch to it? And the biggest question that I have seen is, well, pumps usually have a 4-year warranty and my insurance changes every year, whether I have with the same insurance or not. The terms often change, including what insulin they want me to use. We just went through this with my son this year. We had been using one type of insulin for a long time and they switched us to another brand. And, it's disconcerting and it's a little, it would make, I'll be honest with you, Mike, it would make me hesitant with the United States healthcare situation being what it is right now to go to a pump that would lock me into one kind of insulin. You guys have got to be thinking about that. What are the discussions like? Can you share anything about that?
Well, let me tell you kind of how we think about it. I mean, our goal is to develop an integrated solution. I kind of look at it a little bit like the computer market where, early on, you were able to, and you still can today, is build an integrated system. You can pick the monitor you want, the processor you want, and my brother continues to do that. And he has a great computer that works really well for him. And for myself, that's not what I'm looking for a computer. I've got 4 kids and a lot to do. And I want something that's just going to work. I don't necessarily care what the processor is or what the monitor is. And so that, I kind of went to a Mac 15, 20 years ago because it was a simple solution. So it was another option out there. I think, Apple provided another option to people who needed to get work done and wanted to use a computer. We kind of look at that the same way on the pump side. I think you're going to have people who want to have each component and be able to build that. But as we look at some segment of the market, and in particular those people with type 2 diabetes, we believe a simple solution can provide a real good answer for those individuals. So what we look at this at, we don't look at it necessarily as limiting options. We look at bringing a new option to the marketplace that as an integrated solution can provide a new way to be able to control their blood sugar. So that's how we look at it.
So let's talk a little bit more about that integrated system. When I spoke to Ypsomed, they talked about it using a Dexcom, having a very robust app. It looked like you were able to bolus by phone, or you would be by the time it comes to the United States. Is the partnership with Dexcom exclusive, or do you think you might work with other companies like Abbott, on their Libre and different CGMs that could be integrated into the system?
Yeah, right now it's a 3-way partnership between us and Ypsomed, and then with leveraging Dexcom's CGM at this point. We'll have to see how things progress and whether or not we bring Abbott or other CGMs into the system.
Ypsomed is also very much a pen company. And when I remember in that 2018 event that I've talked about before, Lilly was also talking about integrative pens and things like that. Is that part of this deal here too, or is it just a pump?
No, this is just an exclusive pump partnership.
So when you were looking at the Ypsomed pump, as we mentioned, it's very light, it's very intuitive. Have you tested it, or have they tested it in the U.S. market yet? Is that something that you're going to be doing in terms of, human factors and how people respond to it and that sort of thing?
Yes, we have to, it will be submitted to the regulatory agencies in order to gain approval in the U.S. market. And as part of that, it will be tested in the U.S. through human factors. And we think it will do quite well. We've done a lot of market research and interviewed people who use pumps or who are interested in using pumps. And we think the attributes of the product are going to be well received in the U.S. market.
Again, I don't know how much you can answer on this question, but when you bring a pump like this that's been used in many other countries for several years, is the testing different than, say, what you were originally planning from Cambridge with the Deca pump, a brand new pump, something that hadn't been on the market yet? I would imagine that it's I don't want to say a little smoother, but it's got to be different when it's already been out there and used in thousands of people.
The information is helpful, but the application is similar for every pump, no matter where it's approved or whether it hasn't been approved before. So, the FDA requirements are the same no matter what.
Got it. And I'm curious too, the cartridge that we've been talking about that isn't available in the United States yet, are there other applications for Lilly for that? I mean, that 160 unit cartridge, is that something that could then be used in pens? Are there other uses for it, or will you be making it just for this pump?
I mean, initially it'll be used for this pump or any other device that uses a 1.6 ml cartridge. We'll evaluate every time you put a new form factor of insulin out there. We'll look and see if there's other opportunities that better meets the needs of people living with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So we'll see. No immediate plans at this time.
Okay. Are there other devices that use it currently? I'm not familiar.
Not currently, but there's no reason why someone couldn't produce a third-party, reusable 1.6 ml cart that this would work in.
It's interesting. You mentioned people with type 2 quite a bit in this conversation. And I know in my conversations with manufacturers, with tech companies, more and more people with type 2 are using insulin pumps and are using devices like Dexcoms. And, in fact, I'm really trying to talk about more people who use insulin rather than the specific types. We talk about devices like this, which honestly is kind of hard for me after all these years. Can you talk a little bit about the appeal to that market? How do they use this kind of pump? In other words, most people I know with type 2 who need insulin don't bolus for every meal. They don't necessarily use the same amount of insulin as people with type 1. I'm curious if there's any information you could share on that market.
Yeah, I think what we see is, first of all, the needs, while the disease is different, the needs of someone to control their blood sugar, both for postprandial as well as for basal, is still there, especially for those who are later stages of their type 2 diabetes. And so we feel that no matter who someone is, if they're on insulin, the big thing they want is to kind of stop thinking as much about taking insulin 3 or 4 times a day. That's just something that weighs on a lot of people's mind. And we think it's important to be able to reduce that burden, but also improve care. And that's what we think an integrated insulin management system can do that's wrapped around a pump, whether that's for type 1 or type 2. Now, your question around, what's different about type 2 diabetes, the big difference is the amount of insulin that they take on a daily basis. And because of that, I think the reservoir size and the ability to change that independent of the infusion set is an important feature of this pump, and one that we think both type 1 and type 2, but in particular type 2 diabetics can really value.
It's interesting. When I spoke to the folks at Tandem recently, they brought up their Control IQ software for people with type 2 and how it's really helped. Because most of the time, as you said, people with type 2 aren't bolusing for their meals or for correction dosing. And so being able to have that automatically has really helped. It was something that I mean, just conversationally, it was something that I really hadn't thought of with an automated system like that. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we speak a lot with people using insulin, the needs on a daily basis aren't that different. And the thought process and how they manage that, isn't that different. But you're right, unfortunately, taking insulin is very complex, and it changes on a daily basis, as you know well. And that's what we hope. We hope we can alleviate some of that burden that people have of controlling their blood sugar and their diabetes.
In the United States, anytime a new product comes to market, in addition to submitting to the FDA, you have got to work with the insurers to get these things covered. And I'm curious if your conversations about getting the Ypsomed pump insured also factor around making sure that anyone who insures it can make sure, going back to what we asked about at the beginning, will also cover Lilly insulin as some kind of package. When I spoke to the CEO of Ypsomed, he had kind of implied, and this was speculative, and he admitted that, but he was kind of hoping, I guess is the way to say it, that it would be more affordable in the United States because it could be packaged up with healthcare insurers. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we'll make sure that there's obviously insulin supply for the pump. And so we'll make sure that comes hand in hand so that someone doesn't have a pump that they can't use their insulin on. So we'll definitely solve that problem as we go to the marketplace. I think, we haven't had any specific discussions with payers on this particular product just yet. But what we've had generally in this area is, payers are frustrated with their ability to help their members get good control on insulin. And they believe that better control on insulin can lead to better overall healthcare cost if you look at the total cost of the therapeutic and devices, as well as all of the cost of office visits and the very costly, complications of diabetes. And so they're excited to not only provide better care, the hope of better care, but also the hope of reduced total medical cost.
As we start to wrap up here, just a couple more questions. I got notification, we saw some ads on social media about, and this is separate from the pump, about renewing any coupons for the new year. Can you speak to that a little bit while I've got you here? For 2021, the Lilly coupons that are out there, how do people do that?
Yeah, all they need to do is call our Lilly Diabetes Solution Center. If anyone has trouble paying for a Lilly insulin, you can call up our Lilly Diabetes Solution Center. It's staffed with people who are healthcare professionals who will understand the needs and be able to get you a solution on the phone or to email that to you without any paperwork to fill out or anything like that. And so if one of the things they need is to get an updated coupon, they can just literally call them. And we also are putting more and more options on the website, and we can get you more information on that, Stacey.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could send me the links. And I don't know, Mike, if you know, but I wound up using that coupon in the fall.
Good.
Yeah, as I said, my insurer switched us. We switched in September to a new insurer, and they wanted us to switch to Novolog, which we hadn't used in many years. And I'll be honest, as a little bit of an experiment, I decided to try it. For whatever reason, it wasn't that easy. It took me a couple of weeks. I needed prior authorization. My pharmacist helped out. We went back and forth quite a bit, but we did get it done. And I'm back to paying about $35 a month for Benny's insulin, for my son's insulin, which was great. But it kind of brought me back to the conversation I had on a conference call with Andy Vicari last March, I want to say, when, COVID had first hit and we were all really concerned about, and unfortunately it bore out with employment and the economy. And the question I asked him at the time was just, why not do away with all of these coupons? Because it really, while it was difficult, I was able to use it. I would not have been able to get the Lilly insulin without it with my new insurance. So it did work. But I asked him at the time, and I'll ask you now, why not just lower the price across the board to $35 and make it easy for everybody?
Yeah, for us, it's a complex healthcare system out there. And if we lower our list price, which we have with Insulin Lispro, that's one of the options that we've had. We dropped our list price by 50%. And, we think that the suite of solutions that we have, with lowering our list price with Insulin Lispro, as well as all of the options that we have that are very targeted at the gaps in the system, which is the uninsured, people in high deductible plans, and Part D, that we can create the best possible out-of-pocket experience. No one should have to pay more than $35 for Lilly insulin. 43% of people who use Lilly insulin doesn't pay anything for it based on the health insurance. So, we've looked at the problem, and we believe that this is the best solution we have out there.
I hear you. I get it. It's very complicated. You're not operating in a vacuum. But, you've said several times that you want to help people get better control. The insurers want to get people in better control. One of the reasons people aren't in great control is because it's really expensive, even though, if you have insurance, you're paying for it. You're paying for the high deductibles. I don't need to tell you. We've had these conversations many times before. But I got to believe that this is not a sustainable system. And, I don't really have a question there for you, Mike. But I really hope that next year we're not having the same conversation. And I know you don't want to have it either. So, I'm not because you don't want to answer the questions, but because I imagine that that even if the price was lowered to $35, that Lilly would be fine in business.
Yeah, Stacey, first of all, if anyone has any concerns with, affording Lilly insulin, call our Lilly Diabetes Solutions Center. With the most recent Part D demo project that the CMS introduced in January of this year, no one, whether you're in Part D or commercial or uninsured, should have to pay more than $35 for the insulin. You're right. I don't think the healthcare system right now is sustainable, whether it be for diabetes or other chronic diseases. We shouldn't put the medications that are designed to improve quality of life and to reduce overall total healthcare cost. We shouldn't have those at a high price that people can't afford. And so I hear you, know that we are advocating strongly and working with our other healthcare system partners, whether that be, PBMs and insurance companies, as well as employers and the government on this topic. And it is a very important topic. And I hope, as the Biden administration comes in, that we can have very good conversations and make progress.
Mike, thank you so much for spending so much time with me. I know I kept you over a few minutes, and I appreciate you hanging on and answering those questions. Thanks for being here.
No, thanks, Stacey. I appreciate it. Appreciate everything you do for people living with diabetes.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
More information about Lilly and Ypsomed and their partnership at diabetes-connections.com. The episode homepage, of course, has a transcript and more information, lots of links. This is a story that we will, of course, be watching over the next 2 years until this pump comes to market. And who knows what it'll really come to market as things change along the way. But I'm fascinated by the proprietary nature, as you can tell, because I'll tell you our insulin story in just a couple of minutes. If you're using one type, your insurance company can switch you to a different type. And it can be very difficult. So we'll see. Another point I just wanted to mention, I didn't bring this up during the interview, but when Mike talked about the uniqueness of being able to change the cartridge independent of the inset, there is something unique there about the Ypsopump, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it's not exactly as he explained it. You can do that with any tubed pump, with the Medtronics that are out there right now, with the Tandem, T-Slim, any tubed pump. The way we have done it, and we have always done it since using Animas, almost 14 years ago now, when the cartridge runs out of insulin, we change the cartridge. When the inset hits 3 days, we change the inset, and we don't do them together. Not everybody does it that way. Many, many people change them together. They have worked out exactly how much insulin they need, or they just feel more comfortable doing it together, whatever is your pleasure. But the thing about the Ypsomed pump that is different, my understanding, is that when you do that, you do not waste the insulin that is in the pump tubing. There is a different way. There is something about it that means you don't have to push through and prime all of that insulin, because I know with the Tandem, you do waste insulin because of all the priming. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up and address that as you listen. I know many of you were thinking that's not unique, but that's what he's talking about. I have also reached out to DECA. That is the company that was originally partnering with Lilly. We mentioned that in the interview, to have a new pump and pen system in the U.S. A very different looking pump. It was cylindrical. It was, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, like a disc. It looked almost like a tiny tin. The one that's coming to mind is like a tobacco chew tin, or maybe mince is a better way to put it. Like almost smaller than your palm, but small, thin, and circular. And that was the pump that they were working on. Really interesting. So I've reached out to DECA to see if they're going to continue that work. And DECA, just as an aside, is the company from Dean Kamen, D-E-K-A, Dean Kamen. He is the person who invented the insulin pump years and years ago, very first one. And he's invented a bunch of things, including the Segway. So I'll link up stuff about him too. Very interesting. I'd love to have him on the show, but that's neither here nor there about Lilly. I do know that many of you get frustrated when we talk to them because you want me to just talk about insulin pricing. As you can tell, Mike says what he's going to say, and I will continue to ask about it. We'll continue to talk about it, and send me your questions. I'll see whatever I can do. Our insulin story coming up in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And it really is hard to think of something that changed our diabetes management as much as Dexcom Share and Follow. It is amazing to me that it helps us talk less about diabetes. And that is really one of the wonderful things about Share and Follow. As a caregiver, parent, spouse, whatever, you can help the person with diabetes manage in the way that works for your individual situation. It's about communication and finding out how they want to share the information. Even your kids, this is a decision that you can make together, and talking it out really, really helps. Internet connectivity is required to access Dexcom Follow. Separate Follow app required. Learn more at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. In our innovation segment this week, I'm going to get to our insulin story, but I also want to mention that there's new guidelines for the A1C when it comes to kids. This was kind of quiet. I was surprised it didn't get a lot of attention. I posted it on social, and it was kind of met with a big shrug. The American Diabetes Association has lowered the target A1C guidelines for children with type 1 diabetes. I will read from the summary here. The goal in recommending stricter glucose control was to ensure children with type 1 have better immediate and long-term health outcomes with fewer health complications, and reduced mortality rate. The number has gone from 7.5% for children to less than 7%. And I think as you listen, the podcast audience, frankly, is extremely well educated. You guys are up on so much stuff, and many of you are already striving for less than 7. You're striving for less than 6. We are not striving for less than 6. But I think that this is something that many of you are saying, well, of course. But I got to tell you, I'm a little disappointed in the way they released this. They talk about why. They say things like these stringent measures are not always practiced by caregivers of T1D patients or diabetes providers. Due to concerns and fear, it may cause sudden or dramatic drops in sugar levels. I promise I'm not going to read the whole report, but they don't talk about better education. They don't talk about access to CGM, to insulin pumps, to integrated systems. There's no wording here in the reports about cost or making sure you have a pediatric endo who will give you these things and educate you. I got really annoyed, frankly, reading this. And we'll revisit this. I'll probably reach out to some of the endos who worked on it, I hope to, and talk about, guidelines are great, goals are great, but how are you really going to get us there? Because we all know that the A1C needs to be lower, right? I am hoping that some of you who have kids with an 8 or higher A1C are nodding and going, well, what about help for me? How are we supposed to do this alone? I just don't think it's enough to say, here's the number. I think they need to give much more help and support. Maybe that's a pipe dream. I know most pediatric endocrinologists are great people who really want to help. And, they see us for this teeny tiny amount of time. But let's follow this one along because it's just so frustrating to know that we have a place we want to be, but how do we get there? And, one of the ways we get there, and Mike said this in our interview, is, we need to make sure people have better access to insulin so they can live better with diabetes. Well, we went through this recently in my family, and I will not go through this beat by beat. I did like 10 or 15 minutes on this as a Facebook Live and told the story about when we were switched. Our insurance company switched us from Humalog to Novolog. I told the whole story very lengthy. I will not do that here. I'll tell it in a shorter way. If you want to see the whole story, I'll link it up. But I realized I never told the rest of the story here on the actual podcast. So here we go. In the fall, in early September of 2020, we had a change in our insurance. A change of employment meant we were now buying our own insurance. And we actually had a great experience. We did this several years ago and had a disastrous experience. It was so expensive and nothing was covered. I was really excited that this time around we found something great. We used an insurance broker, and I would highly recommend that. Maybe we'll do a show on that. I'm making all sorts of notes on future shows. But somebody helped us. He didn't know a lot about diabetes, but he knew what we needed. So that was great. And my husband lives with type 2 as well, as you likely know. But this new insurance company did not have Humalog as the one they wanted us to get. It was Novolog. And I posted the pricing on social media. It was like, $35 a month for Novolog and $1,300 a month for Humalog. So it was, quote, covered, but, at a different rate. And we were going to go ahead and do that. Benny had used Novolog for, I want to say, the first 7 years of his diagnosis. And then our insurance switched us. But he's been doing really well. Everything's chugging along. And I thought, gosh, I really don't want to switch him. And I was kind of at 6s and 7s, not really knowing what to do. And I was talking to my parents about this. And my dad said, I heard on your podcast that if you have commercial insurance, you can get any insulin with a manufacturer's coupon for $35 a month. And I thought, Dad, you're the best. Thank you for listening to my podcast. And of course, you are correct. And then that week, I spoke with Beyond Type 1 about their new website, getinsulin.org. So I went on getinsulin.org and filled in all the information, and a coupon popped up from Lilly. I printed it out, and it said, go right to the pharmacy and get your insulin. And I know how these things work, so I didn't go to the pharmacy. I called the pharmacy and said, is this legit? And they went, tickety, tickety, tick in the computer. Sorry, Stacey, this isn't going to work for you. And I know the pharmacist there very well. We've been so fortunate. I've known him for all of Benny's diagnosis. I want to say all 14 years. It's been the same guy. So we really went back and forth and tried to figure out what was going on. It was a quirk in the way our insurance wanted to bill it. So I called Lilly. They said, no, it should be fine. Here's the codes to give the pharmacist. Everything should be fine. I called the pharmacist. He said, no, those codes are not going to work. And they didn't. What he told me to do, and this is what worked. Our endocrinologist had to call in a brand new prescription. We were going off the old one that we'd been using, for the whole year, or many years. So he had to call in a new prescription. He had to call in a prior authorization. And then after that, when they reran the coupon, it worked just fine. Everybody's different. The pharmacist and the folks at Lilly told me that every insurance, every state, sometimes the pharmacies run these different ways. So if you run into a brick wall, definitely keep pushing. And I'm telling you as a listener of this podcast, if you do run into a brick wall with Lilly and their coupon, email me, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com. Let's make sure you're talking to the right people, because it took me a while to find the people that really dig down and do this at Lilly. That's their job. And how ridiculous is this, that this is somebody's job to figure out how to get around all these coupons and use them in the ways that they're meant to be used rather than just dropping the list price. I mean, it makes me crazy to talk about. I'm already going too long. Bottom line is we got the coupon to work. And then it worked a second time. I called my pharmacist the other day because it was time to renew. And I said, hey, I've heard that you have to renew in the new year. Is it going to work? And he said, it's going through just fine. And then he laughed. He's like, let's run it without the coupon. I said, why? He was just curious. He's like, yep, it's still, $1,300 a month without the coupon. I said, well, don't put it in without the coupon. Don't even bother. So that's the story. It leads me back to what happened if I was using the Ypsopump with Benny. And then in September, my new insurance company said, no, you have to use Novolog. And I didn't know. I didn't have a podcast. And I didn't know I could do all that. I didn't know I could get the coupon. Or what if the coupon goes away? There's no guarantee it's going to be there. And then I'm stuck with a pump that I can't use the insulin that my insurance company makes me use. So obviously, we don't know. That's a lot of speculation. But those are the concerns I have. Have you used one of these coupons? How about the Novo coupon? What's working for you guys? I'll start a thread in the Facebook group, but you can always, ping me and let me know what's up with you or if you need help that way. It's just ridiculous. Maybe next week, instead of innovations, I'll bring back Tell Me Something Good. We need the good news stories too. As I mentioned last week, we are about to start classic episodes. The first one will be this Thursday, and that is an episode I taped almost 5 years ago with Ernie Prado. He is a rocket scientist for real at NASA. Great guy. It was so much fun to talk to him. He has a terrific story. And what I love about his story is it's not the perfect diabetic. He really struggled, and he talks about why and how he kind of got out of that. I think it's one that, as a parent of a child with type 1, I love those kinds of stories because I don't expect perfection in my kid. And I really like to hear about other people who, all due respect, Ernie, who really messed it up and are okay and are doing fine now. So that's on Thursday. You don't have to listen to it on Thursday, obviously, whenever you have time. We're going to be putting out a lot more episodes. So when you have time, listen, the podcast will be here for you. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Simms. Until next time, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Simms Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.